Good afternoon and welcome to ATG webinar, Finished Plans Without the Fuss. My name is Matt Linn and I will be your virtual host for today. This will be a brief presentation regarding a potential workflow with interior design and finishes. Afterwards, we'll follow it up with a brief Q&A session. So before we get started, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight a large BIM conference that ATG hosts each year, Midwest University. It'll be March 18th and 19th at Mystic Lake Hotel and Casino in Prior Lake, Minnesota. If you register this week, you can save $100 off your tuition fee. In addition, if you are an ATG customer, you get an additional $100 off. The conference will have 140 or more classes, and you can earn your AIA credits while you're there. So if you are interested, please visit the website indicated below at midwest-u.com. This webinar is live, so please feel free to drop questions into the chat window. I will review and address each of these at the conclusion of the presentation. We are also recording this webinar as we do with all of our webinars. So if you find this to be useful and want to revisit the presentation, please feel free to watch it again at the website you see on the screen. Or perhaps you may want to forward to a coworker or colleague that was unable to attend the live version today. Not only will you find this webinar at this location, but all of our previous webinars as well. So as we all know, there are many ways to document interior finishes in your construction documents. So today we will look at one method which utilizes the innate intelligence that is built into Revit while keeping non-interior views clean. We will discuss modeling thin walls and floors, which will enable us to filter out all finish information from non-interior views. We'll take a look at creating custom material tags and interior finishes and show an example of how we can populate our drawing sheets with all of these items. Okay, so in this first step, we'll create a thin wall type and a thin floor type. We just need one of each, which will ultimately hold all the information for our finishes. Okay, so we have a plan here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to come over to the type selector, hit edit type, and go ahead and duplicate a wall to make a interior wall type. Now you can see the naming convention is the int dash finish wall. So that int will be crucial down the line when it comes to filtering things. And you can use any one you want, but I just chose int. I'm going to make this a nice thin wall, like a 1/4 inch. Try that again, a 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'll draw this wall down. We now have our new wall type. I'm going to hit my thin lines, create similar, and go ahead and draw this wall over our chipboard on the model in place. Let's see, I'll do finish face exterior here. Now I'm going to draw it directly over the windows. You can see I'm not starting and stopping. I'm drawing directly over. Same thing with the door. I'm going to draw the finish wall directly over the door. And then I'll go ahead and trim these up. Okay, so I'll delete that original wall. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the same thing with a floor. Okay, so I'm going to come here, edit type, duplicate, and make a new interior with using the naming convention int, and we'll call it finish floor. And say okay, and we'll give it a nice thin thickness of a 1/4 inch as well. I'll say okay, and then we'll go ahead and draw this finished flooring directly on top of a floor that's already in place. Now, for those of you who like your transition strips at the center of the opening below the door, you can go ahead and, go around like so, or straight across, whatever your standard is. And you finish the floor. Okay, we get a little notification that highlighted floors overlap. Okay, we know that because we had a floor there. I'm just going to give this a vertical offset 1/4 inch, which will put it directly above the structural floor. Okay, now if you remember, I went ahead and drew those directly over the windows So if you have two windows and you join geometry, two walls, if you join geometry and one of them have openings, it will go ahead and cut openings in both walls. So after you draw your interior walls, go ahead and join geometry to the other walls and it'll create all the openings that were already there. Okay, so next we'll create some materials that will ultimately be the graphics as expected. In addition, we will use these materials as our primary vehicle to extract information for both tags and schedules. Okay, so I'm going to come up to the Manage tab, to the Material Browser. I'm going to create a new material and rename it using our standard naming convention. Now you'll notice I use this in a lot of places, that capital INT, just to be consistent. So this will be a carpet field. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to input some of this identity data. Now, as you know, these are parameters. I'm just going to input these parameter values because ultimately we'll be scheduling based on the values put in this material. So I put a description in, a 24 by 24 tile, comment, I'll just put the color gray in. Now this example is going to be extremely generic, so I'll just say carpet manufacturer. Same thing with the model, I'll just say carpet model. If you have a cost, you can put it there. I think I'll skip that today. If you have a website, you could put that in. I'm just going to the standard xyz.com. And then you can use a keynote. I'm not going to use a keynote, but I'm going to use that parameters value as a method to categorize my materials. Okay, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to apply the surface materials or the surface pattern and graphics that I want to apply. Now I said this was a 24 by 24 tile. I don't think I have one, which is fine. I can just grab this 12 by 12 and duplicate it. I will call it a 24-inch tile. And then come and modify the line spacing. Say, okay, now we have our additional type. I'll go ahead and apply it here. And seeing as this is carpet, I'm going to give it a second surface pattern. I'm going to give it sand. Obviously, you wouldn't have to do this. I kind of like to have the sand as a background whenever I have carpet. Okay, so we have our initial interior material. I'm just going to duplicate it. That first one takes the longest because you're inputting everything. So now I can just duplicate this and I'll call this INT carpet accent. And then I'll just modify the parameter values that change for this specific one. Obviously, name will already update itself. Let's say the accent carpet is a 12 by 12 tile, and we'll say it's the color blue. And then we'll fill in the mark value. So this mark, I'm using it as a method to ultimately tag these in plan. So we're going to call this CPT2. As you saw, the previous one is CPT1. All right, I'm going to duplicate this material again using the same naming convention, the INT, and this will be the tile field, and I'm creating this for the walls. Again, changing the description, 8 by 8 tile, the name filled in automatically. We'll just switch this to tile manufacturer and tile model. And then the keynote. Again, I'm using keynote as a method to categorize, which you'll see later in the schedule. And then CT1 will be the mark, which I'll use for the tags. Okay, now I'll just duplicate let's see. Now I'll just make a tile duplicate. Okay, changing the size right here, 8-inch tile. and then adjust the spacing accordingly, 8 inches either way. Say okay. Oh, that one already exists. Okay, so I can just simply grab the one that was already in place and apply it. Okay, so now I can duplicate this material, and I'll call this my tile accent. Again, just come in and modify any of the data you want to change. We'll modify the surface pattern to something smaller, like a 4-inch tile. And then name automatically. We'll change the description to a 4x4. Now, obviously, I'm going and creating all of these materials right now. For you guys, it would be great to have, you know, some standard materials already set up in your template, so you wouldn't have to do this every time. But even so, it still doesn't take that long just to create 4 basic materials. Okay, so now we will apply these materials to our finish elements, and we will use the commands paint and split face to separate multiple materials on a single surface. All right, so I'm going to go to my modified tab, hit the paint button, browse to the INT materials that I just created, and I'll put the interior field on the walls, and I'll put the interior field on the, interior field carpet on the floor. And then I'm going to use the split command to come in and split face on these faces so I can break them up into the field and the accent tile. So I'm going to select pick lines and grab that, which will ultimately split that wall into 2 material-wise. Do the same thing here. I'm going to do pick lines and grab that joint that's roughly down the middle and finish that. Okay, I'm going to use split face again on the floor and use pick lines again to find a joint roughly in the middle, maybe offset a little bit. And now I can make, when you finish that, I've broken these into 2 different materials, 2 on the walls and 2 on the floor. So now I can come back and paint and give a different material to the same wall and the same floor. So now that's my floor accent. And now I have my wall tile accent, which is the 4-inch tile. Okay, now if you remember, I put that sand hatch on the floor because I like it in carpet. And then I duplicated the materials, which put it on the walls as well. Okay, I don't want that sand on the wall, so I'm just going to come back in and pull that sand out for the second surface on the walls. Just go to none on both of those, and now the sand is only on the floor. Okay, so now let's create a rule-based filter that will eliminate interior finish information from all non-interior views. So as a side note, my preference is to always use rule-based filters as opposed to selection-based filters, because selection-based filters are static and will not allow for future developments of the model, whereas rule-based filters will grow as the model grows. Okay, so I'm going to come back in, hit my thick lines on this. First thing, I'm going to rename this view to level 1 finish plan. Okay, then I'll go ahead and duplicate this plan. And we'll call this one finish plan annotation. Okay, so now we need to come and create a filter which will pull all that finish information off the annotation plan. So I'm going to come to my filters here, add a new one, as again, I like to use rule-based pretty much every time. I'm going to create a new one and we'll just call it INT, again, using that same naming convention, INT finishes. Okay, and then pick the categories that it's assigned to. Now in this example, I've only done floors and walls, but it could be any category. You can put any category and use this filter moving forward. Okay, so for the parameter, I'm going to use type comments equals, again, using the same naming convention, int. Okay, so now we've created a new filter. And now you need to assign it to the view. Now that I've created it, you just add that one we've done here, and then turn the visibility off. Okay, so this is for all of your non-interior views. Now you can see the finishes are still there, and that's because the type comments has not been filled in yet. So I'm going to go anything that represents finishes and come into the type comments and type in int. Okay, I'll do the same thing with the finish wall. Now you don't have to do this on the materials, you're doing it on the elements, the walls and the floors, because that's the categories we selected in the filter. So we'll say okay. If we go back to our finish plan and our annotation plan, you can see they have now been removed via that filter. Okay, they're still on here. And just to show you, I'll go ahead and add that filter here to show you. You can do it in any view. It doesn't have to be in plan. You can add that filter. You can turn the visibility off, and it toggles all the finish information off. For this case, I want to leave it on, so I'll turn it back on. Okay, so now let's create a material tag specifically for our finishes. So if you recall, I added a mark to each material. So now we can use this mark parameter value to report to the tag. All right, so I'm going to go File, New, Annotation Symbol. I'm just going to do a generic tag. And then first I'll save it on my desktop as the int, again, same naming convention. Material tag, say save. And then the category. Make sure you put the category to material, and that's what makes it a material tag, which is how we're scheduling all of our finishes. So that needs to be a material category. Okay, so now let's come in and let's create a label. I like to zoom in and put it right in the middle, and then use that mark, which was the parameter we gave each one. I always do center middle. That way, when it grows, if it grows, it goes from the inside out. And that's just graphically. So if you remember, if I come back here and look at this material, one of the things we added was this mark. Okay, so ultimately, that's what that tag is going to read. All right, so now I'm going to come back, do whatever lines you want around it. For now, I'll just do a simple polygon, 6-sided. Drag that up. Okay. So now I'll go ahead and save the tag again. I'll just overwrite the original and then load into the project. Okay, so now we have our material tag that's specifically for our interior finishes. All right, these tags are really big, so I'm going to adjust my scale first. We'll try a 1/4 inch. Now go back to material tag, and you can place them, which again is just reading that mark parameter value that's assigned in the material itself. Okay, let's make a quick elevation to show. We'll just do the one with the windows. Okay, we've got a new elevation. Again, material tag, it remembers that CT1 and CT2 from the marks in the materials themselves. Now on 3D views, if you save orientation and lock it, you can also tag in 3D. So I'll call this, let's see, 3D finishes, okay? And now we can come back to that same material tag. Okay, again, those came in big, so I'm gonna switch to a 1/4 inch scale. and come back and lay down the tags. All right, so now let's create a finish schedule that extracts information from the materials we created initially. All right, so I'm going to come up to my View tab, come over to the Schedule command, and we're doing a material takeoff. Okay, it's important that you do material because that's how we're scheduling it. We're not doing elements, we're doing it via material. So give it a name, interior finish schedule. You want to do multi-category because we have both walls and floors and whatever else you decide to schedule. And from here, just input all of the parameters where you have values in the materials themselves, the identity data. Okay, so these are the ones that I populated. Comments, and I'm also going to do I'm going to do an image as well. So that'll allow us to have like a thumbnail image of the material. Now you can see this got all of our materials, but since we use the int prefix, we can now filter out the materials to just the finished ones we want. So I'm going to come here to filter by name and say contains int, which will get rid of all the materials that don't have that. Okay. Now I can come and I can sort it by keynote, which if you remember, I'm actually using the keynote parameter as a category. So basically I'm sorting by category and then material mark. I'm going to uncheck this, which skinnies it down to just one instance of each material being used. Okay, so if you have a material image, you can come and add a little thumbnail of it. So we've added some gray carpet there. We'll grab a blue carpet, and obviously I saved these on my desktop prior to the presentation, so I could quickly grab them. But if you're, you could pull these directly from the website of the actual finishers you're using and populate your finish schedule. Okay, now we'll grab a blue tile like so. Okay, now the material name, we probably don't need to see that in the schedule. I just used it for sorting and for sorting, so I'm just going to hide it. Now you can come in and change these whatever you want. I'm going to call this category because, again, that's why I'm using that parameter. I'll change this to, I don't know, type. And what I'm doing here is obviously just graphics on the schedule itself. I'm not changing the field or the parameter that it's scheduling. I'm just changing the graphics of what you see on your sheet. So we'll call this model, call this, let's see, this will be color / finish. This could be the size. Okay, and we got our website. We'll just call this URL and image for this last one. Okay, so finally we can take all this information and we can pull it onto a sheet. All right, so let's go ahead and make a new sheet. I'll just use this one that's in here. Come down, edit the title block as necessary. Maybe this is A101.1 for the finish plan, or whatever your firm standard is. Owner, project name, sheet name, we'll just call it finishes. And that'll be good for now. So now I can simply go grab all the things we've created. We have a schedule, we have a plan, we have a elevation and a 3D drawing. Okay, I'm just pulling these all on a sheet. Some of them are coming in big because it's got a lot of extraneous information, which is fine. I'll just come back in, grab the elevation markers, VH for view hide. Same thing down here. I'm going to hide the level category. Okay, now I can just move these around and sort them on the sheet like so. I'm going to pull my crop a little bit tighter. I'll go ahead and hide the crop, and I think I'll hide the levels as well. And I'll adjust my view titles. Okay, clean them up a little bit more. Some people like the bottom right convention, so we'll just do that. I'll pull them down like so. Bring my schedule down. Again, the schedule is extracting everything directly from the materials. None of this is, just strict text. I'm going to adjust the column widths here so it's not extending into that second line. Same thing here under the manufacturer and the category. Same thing, color finish. Okay, so now we basically have a finish sheet, fully coordinated. And because of the filters, none of this information will pop up on your floor plan or elevations or any other view that you don't want to see the interior information. Okay, so this concludes the webinar, Finish Plans Without the Fuss. As mentioned, there are many ways to handle interior design elements in a model. This is just one method, so I hope this is valuable to you. Maybe you could use one or all the methods discussed today. So with that, do we have any questions? If you do, just put them in the chat window. Okay, we have a question come in. Do you have to apply a filter to every view? Ultimately, yes, you do have to apply a filter to every non-interior view. But if your firm is using view templates, you can apply that filter in the view template. That way you're doing it once for every single annotation plan and once for every single, interior elevation or whatever view type you want to filter it out. So view templates is a quick way to achieve that. Any other questions? Okay, I do not see any questions. Thank you guys for your time. I hope this was valuable. Again, don't forget about MU, which is March 18 and 19. If you go ahead and register soon, you can save $100 this week.